Good evening, live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh, coming up in the next 30 minutes. Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds phone call with Prime Minister Christopher Luxon. Landmark India-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement announced. Under the FTA, New Zealand will invest $20 billion into India over 15 years, asserts Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese apologizes to the nation and the Jewish community over Bondi Beach mass shooting that killed 15 people. Sheikh Hasina hits out at Yunus-led interim government in Bangladesh, accuses him of failing to maintain law and order and allowing extremism. Bangladesh minority leaders accuse Yunus of failing to curb violence. Prime Minister Narendra Modi held telephone conversation with Prime Minister of New Zealand, Christopher Luxon, on Monday. The two leaders jointly announced the successful conclusion of the historic, ambitious and mutually beneficial India-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement. The leaders agreed that the FTA would serve as a catalyst for greater trade, investment, innovation and shared opportunities between both the countries. The leaders also welcomed progress in other areas of bilateral cooperation, including defense, sports, education and people-to-people ties. This is India's 7th FTA in the last few years after Oman, the UK, EFTA countries, UAE, Australia and Mauritius. The FTA would significantly deepen bilateral economic engagement, enhance market access, promote investment flows, strengthen strategic cooperation between the two countries, and also open up new opportunities for innovators, entrepreneurs, farmers, MSMEs, students and youth of both countries across various sectors. With a strong and credible foundation provided by the FTA, both leaders expressed confidence in doubling bilateral trade over the next 5 years, as well as investment of $20 billion in India from New Zealand over the next 15 years. A New Zealand Prime Minister in a social media post said, and I quote, "I've just spoken with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi following conclusion of the New Zealand-India Free Trade Agreement. The FTA reduces or removes tariffs on 95% of our exports to India. It's forecast that New Zealand exports to India would increase from $1.1 billion to $1.3 billion per year over the coming 2 decades. Boosting trade means more Kiwi jobs, higher wages, and more opportunities for hard-working New Zealanders. The agreement builds on the strong friendship between our two countries. India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and this gives Kiwi businesses access to 1.4 billion Indian consumers. Our government is relentlessly focused on fixing the basics and building future with new trade deals like this, helping both the countries grow." Unquote. And speaking to the media, India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal said, under the landmark agreement, New Zealand will invest $20 billion in India over the span of next 15 years.
$20 billion, we must see in the context of the size of the New Zealand economy. So far, in the last 25 years, New Zealand has only invested $70 million. So they are committing to invest now 1,80,000 crores. So from 630 crore investment over 25 years, New Zealand has committed to invest 1,80,000 crores in the next 15 years. When you see this in context, you recognize what a big gain it is for India. This will open up, as I said, collaboration in several sectors, particularly benefiting our farmers, our dairy and our MSMEs.
The Commerce Minister also said that this FTA turns ties with New Zealand from friendly to formidable, especially in trade and innovation.
The seventh free trade agreement, all of them with developed economies with significantly larger per capita incomes than India, demonstrating that we are expanding trade relations rapidly with countries who complement the Indian economy rather than compete with India. The FTA turns New Zealand ties from friendly to formidable, especially for trade, innovation and youth-driven growth.
As per the Mastercard Economics Institute, India is expected to remain one of the fastest growing major economies in 2026, supported by strong policy measures, favorable demographics and rapid digitalization, even as growth moderates towards long-term trends. The Mastercard Economics Institute forecast India's real GDP growth at 6.6% in 2026. Despite this moderation, India's growth outlook remains resilient, underpinned by domestic policy support and structural strengths. The monetary easing, income tax reforms, GST rationalization are expected to bolster consumption. Targeted export support measures will mitigate downside risks from global environment, while lower commodity and global goods prices support resilience. Digitization, technological advancement and favorable demographics position India as a key growth engine, enabling expansion of global capability centers in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. Progress on the US-India trade deal will closely influence external demand, with challenges potentially accelerating supply chain diversification and bilateral agreements. Moving on, Australia's New South Wales State Parliament was recalled on Monday to vote on proposed new laws that would impose major curbs on firearm ownership. While new court documents detail the Bondi beach terror attack, Sajid and Navid Akram allegedly planned the attack for months. They surveyed the site, carried weapons and explosives. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese apologized to the nation, took the responsibility for the atrocity that shook the nation.
Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese apologised to the country's Jewish community and called for bipartisan support as he pushes for new laws against hate speech and extremism. Tens of thousands, including Australian Prime Minister and other leaders, attended the heavily guarded main memorial event in New South Wales.
As Prime Minister, I feel the weight of responsibility for an atrocity that happened whilst I'm Prime Minister. And I'm sorry for what the Jewish community and our nation as a whole has experienced. The government will work every day to protect Jewish Australians, to protect the fundamental right as Australians that they have to be proud of who they are, to practice their faith, to educate their children and to engage in Australian society in the fullest way possible.
The Parliament of Australia's New South Wales state was recalled on Monday to vote on proposed new laws that would impose major curbs on firearm ownership following the mass shooting on Sydney's Bondi beach last week. The new rules will cap the number of guns an individual can own to 4 or 10 for exempted individuals like farmers. The legislation would also ban the display of terrorist symbols. Authorities will also be able to prohibit protests for up to 3 months following a terrorism incident.
We're introducing new laws, tough new laws, to protect the community, to crack down on hate and strengthen public safety. The legislation bans the public displays of terrorist symbols, outlaws violence, incitement to violence in New South Wales, and gives police stronger powers during public assemblies.
Removing guns from our street makes our streets safer. We have more than 1.1 million guns in our state. And reducing the number of those, particularly for rec shooters, I think is reasonable.
Meanwhile, court documents released on Monday have revealed that the suspect, Navid Akram, conducted firearm training in an area of New South Wales outside of Sydney with his father. Akram has been transferred from the hospital to jail. He's facing multiple charges, including terrorism and 15 murders. Anamika's report for DD India.
Moving on, in an email interview with Asian News International, former Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, addressed the spiral of violence in Bangladesh, which included lynching of a Hindu man, has elicited deep concern from India, especially in the light of recent threats by radical groups to Indian mission in the country. Former Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina sharply criticized the Muhammad Yunus-led interim government for straining bilateral ties with New Delhi. She asserted that current tensions are entirely Yunus's making, as his administration issues hostile statements against India, fails to protect religious minorities, and allows extremists to dictate foreign policy. Hasina highlighted India's decades-long role as Bangladesh's steadfast partner, emphasizing that deep fundamental ties will outlast any temporary government. She accused Yunus of emboldening extremists who attacked Indian missions, placing them in power, releasing terrorists and granting immunity to hooligans, warning of multiplied lawlessness, minority persecution and eroded credibility under Yunus. Sheikh Hasina expressed confidence that legitimate governance will restore the sensible 15-year partnership. And leaders of minority organizations in Bangladesh have accused the Yunus-led interim government of failing to stop violence, killings and persecutions targeting religious and ethnic minorities, warning of growing insecurity and impunity across the country. The allegations were made on Monday during a human chain organized by Minority Unity Front in front of the National Press Club in Dhaka. Leaders of Bangladesh Hindu, Bauddha, Christian Oikya Parishad said Hindus, Buddhists, Christians and indigenous communities were living in extreme insecurity, accusing law enforcement agencies of remaining passive in the face of repeated attacks. They also raised concerns over attacks on media houses and cultural institutions, including Prothomalo, Daily Star and others. Protesters demanded a proper investigation into Deepu Das's killing and accountability for those responsible, warning that continued inaction could further endanger minority communities. Demonstrators also expressed anxiety about whether minorities would be able to participate freely in the forthcoming elections. The protests come amid heightened tensions nationwide following recent incidents of mob violence and unrest, including attacks on journalists and media organizations. Political leaders, civil society members and professional groups have called for unity to resist what they describe as ill forces behind mob violence and warned that continued impunity threatens democracy and social stability in Bangladesh. Meanwhile, the Editors' Council of Bangladesh's president and New Age editor Nurul Kabir alleged that either a section of interim government or the government as a whole allowed the coordinated attacks and arson at the office of Prothom Alo and the Daily Star on the night of December 18th. Speaking on Channel 24 talk show Muktabak on Sunday night, Kabir said, despite repeated calls and messages to senior advisors and government officials during the attacks, authorities failed to act decisively to prevent violence or ensure timely rescue operations. He said assurances were given, but by then the fire had already spread through multiple floors while journalists remained trapped inside. At a joint protest rally organized by Editors' Council and the Newspaper Owners Association of Bangladesh, BNP Secretary General Mirza Fakhrul Islam Alamgir said violence was not just against two newspapers, but an assault on democracy itself. Leaders from political parties, civil society, business groups and cultural organizations joined the protest and formed a human chain demanding accountability. The coordinated arson and vandalism of Bangladesh's two leading newspapers have been widely described as a black day for the country's media, raising serious questions about press freedom, public safety and states' willingness or ability to protect democratic institutions. Let's now look at other stories making news around the world. As the snow depths reach sufficient levels, owners of horse-drawn sleighs opened the ski centers in Turkey. Located in Saykamis district of Kars, the resort is well known for its pine forests, crystal clear snow and long ski slopes. Tourists come to the ski center to enjoy skiing on the slopes while also taking the sled rides through the snowy landscapes, adding a different kind of pleasure to their winter holidays. Dozens of farmers blocked the A2-E19 highway at the French-Belgian border on Sunday night to oppose authorities' plans to mass cull of cattle aimed at stopping the spread of nodular dermatitis, commonly known as lumpy skin disease. The birthplace of Jesus, Bethlehem, is all set to host tourists for Christmas. They are hoping a surge in visitors during Christmas week after a prolonged Gaza conflict. The signs of festive life returned as Bethlehem lit its Christmas tree. The West Bank city is known for its tourist attractions. Still to come on this edition of DD India Live. 16 people killed in Indonesia bus crash. Heavy snowfall hits Kargil. And DRDO Rashtriya Raksha University ink agreement for defense and internal security.
Can the US launch a bombing campaign against Iran? The Philippines vessel suffered structural damage. The saga of child sexual abuse is the United States China's debt trap strategy. Truth is stranger than fiction. But sometimes hard to uncover. Trust us to tell the truth, unadulterated and pure, of every story that matters to you.
Exactly what save your country.
You read between the lines, cut the clutter, and connect the dots to get you the full picture. Watch Connecting the Dots at these times with me, only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. On to Russia-Ukraine conflict now. Talks held between US, European and Ukrainian officials over the last 3 days in Florida aimed at ending the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. American Special Envoy Steve Witkoff called the meetings and separate talks with Russian negotiators productive and focused on a shared strategic approach between Ukraine, the United States and Europe. The meetings in Miami were the latest in a series of talks between the US, Russia and Ukraine on a US-drafted 20-point plan to end the conflict. Witkoff said a US-Ukraine meeting focused on 4 key points: further development of the 20-point plan, a multilateral security guarantee framework, a US security guarantee framework for Ukraine, further development on economics and prosperity to rebuild Ukraine. As Russia's conflict in Ukraine is going towards the end of its 4th year, and as the US and others are trying to negotiate a ceasefire, the cost of the ongoing conflict has been a major concern to Ukraine and its European partners. Now, the EU has agreed on an aid package for the war-torn country. Lars Holter is with DW and joins me from Berlin. Lars, what exactly is Brussels doing about the matter?
Thanks for having me. Well, let's start with the good news. The European Union has decided to grant Ukraine an interest-free credit in the amount of 90 billion euros. And that financial help doesn't come a day too soon. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky had warned his allies across Europe that his country was running out of funds and would have to end the production of drones it so urgently needs to defend itself against Russia. Now, 90 billion euros will flow for 2 years, interest-free, like I said, and all of it is financed by the EU taking on debt, which again is guaranteed by the EU budget. Now, for the not-so-good news, this construct sending money in form of a credit is what some of the member nations had called a Plan B, the initial idea that Germany and some others had preferred. was to use frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. Some 210 billion euros are frozen in European accounts, most of it in Belgium. And many had thought it fair to use this money taken from the aggressor to help out Ukraine. After all, they're expecting Russia to eventually pay reparations to Ukraine anyway. So there is some legal and ethical argument behind this, even though, of course, the whole idea was risky and an end of the ongoing conflict is currently not in sight.
But why did EU members not go for Plan A now? Why didn't they use the Russian assets to support Ukraine?
Simple answer, because Belgium blocked the effort. Most of the frozen Russian assets are actually in Belgium. They're with Euroclear. That is definitely not a household name, and it's not even a name most people in business and finance would recognize. Euroclear is a leading global provider of financial market infrastructure services for domestic and cross-border securities transactions. That's where the Russian assets are. And the Belgian government was afraid that if they were handed over to Ukraine, that Russia might sue them and that the responsibility for the entire transaction would fall on Belgium. So they had asked for unlimited guarantees from EU partners to help them out. That was tricky, and in the end, it was actually Hungary, usually the EU member country closest aligned with Moscow, that brought up the idea of a credit, and that was voted on, confirmed, and is now in place.
And what are the reactions you are picking up on this deal?
There was a lot of disappointment internationally, with many saying that not using Russian funds out of fear that Moscow would retaliate would be read as a sign of weakness. Then again, and most importantly, at least Ukraine is getting the funds they so urgently need. Now, as for the countries that originally wanted to use Russian assets, they too called the outcome of the EU Commission meeting a success. But that was to save face. Just looking at Germany, Chancellor Friedrich Merz celebrated the fact that Ukraine would get the financial aid it needed. But since he had made it very clear from the get-go that, in his opinion, Russian funds should be used, this outcome is a clear loss for him.
Lars Holter, thank you. Moving on, in a tragic incident, at least 16 people were killed, several others injured after a bus lost control and struck a concrete barrier before rolling on a road in Indonesia's Java main island on early Monday. The inter-province bus was travelling from Jakarta to Yogyakarta when it overturned while entering a curved exit ramp near the Semarang city. The rescue team and police arrived soon after the accident and launched a rescue operation. 15 people were pronounced dead at the scene, while another person died in hospital. Authorities are yet to confirm the cause of the accident. Transport accidents are common in Indonesia. In 2024, at least 12 people were killed when a car crashed into a bus and another car on a busy highway. In 2019, at least 35 people were killed when a bus plunged into a ravine on the western island of Sumatra. India's push towards Atmanirbhar Bharat in defence and internal security received a fresh boost today as Defence Research and Development Organisation, DRDO and Rashtriya Raksha University signed a Memorandum of Understanding to strengthen collaboration in research, education, training and technology support. The MOU was signed at South Block in New Delhi in the presence of Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, marking a significant step towards building indigenous capabilities for defence and internal security during the Amritkal period. The partnership brings together DRDO's cutting-edge technological expertise and Rashtriya Raksha University's academic and policy strength in internal security. The collaboration will focus on joint research projects, PhD, fellowship programs, specialist training for security forces, and studies on emerging operational challenges. The initiative is expected to enhance tech preparedness, support life cycle management of DRDO developed systems for security forces, and reinforce India's strategic autonomy through a whole-of-nation approach. Union Minister for Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Bhupendra Yadav, addressed a press conference on the Aravali Conservation Framework on Monday, clarifying the Supreme Court's observation. The minister said the ruling recognizes and endorses the Government of India's sustained efforts to protect the Aravali range through scientific assessment, strict safeguards and initiatives such as Aravali Green Wall project.
in recognition of the ecological importance of the Aravalli range, the MOEF and CC has also launched the Aravalli Green Wall Project, an initiative aimed at restoring degraded land, preventing desertification, enhancing green cover, and improving the ecological health of Aravalli landscape. So this is the first time that the green movement of the government is also recognized.
In Ladakh, light to moderate snowfall has been recorded at many places across Kargil district since Saturday night. According to the latest weather update, light to moderate snow is likely to continue at many places in Kargil and Zanskar. Leh has turned into a white wonderland with its first spell of snow. Visuals from Leh showed trees completely covered in snow, and houses and fences were also blanketed in snow. According to Indian Met Department, Leh recorded a minimum temperature of -2 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, Sonamarg in Kashmir Valley witnessed the first snowfall of the season on Sunday, covering the region in thick blanket of white. At the same time, Srinagar continues to experience a persistent cold wave with foggy mornings. Heavy fog is visible in visuals near Dal Lake, with boat rides and sightseeing still operating. St. Petersburg, Russia's second largest city and former capital of the Russian Empire, is counting down the days until New Year and Christmas. The city is traditionally decorated for the festive season with elements inspired by its imperial past. Glittering crowns, stylized double-headed eagles adorn the streets after dusk. Take a look. And that's all in this edition of DD India Live. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan this QR code on the screen to download now. And we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live. Namaskar.